Okay, so hi everybody. Thanks for coming and joining us this morning. So this is an event we're going to be having focusing on scalable cooking solutions for the SDGs, and we've got some really interesting country experiences here. And so I just wanted to say a few words about why we think this conversation is really important. So we know that universal access to clean cooking is really central to meeting several of the SDGs. And so we've got SDGs on women's empowerment, on health, inequality, and then of course, affordable clean energy and climate action. And so it's really baked into achieving the SDGs, and we need to have this conversation to sort of see the transformative effect it can have in communities and in countries. Now, many countries have expanded clean cooking access through subsidized liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG. But we know that LPG subsidies often benefit wealthier households more than the poor. And more than that, LPG subsidies strain public budgets, expose governments to volatile markets, and import dependence. And so reallocating LPG subsidies towards renewables aligns with emission reduction goals and climate targets. And so clean cooking solutions such as electric cooking or biogas offer transformative alternatives. They reduce household air pollution, they lower long-term energy costs, strengthen energy security, and accelerate progress across the SDGs. So this side event is co-hosted by the International Institute for Sustainable Development, IISD, the organization for which I work. And it's also co-hosted with the National Research and Innovation Agency of Indonesia, BRIN, and Solar Cookers International. And we're going to be showcasing real-world, evidence-based, and inclusive clean cooking initiatives from India, Indonesia, and the Central African Republic. So we're really looking forward to today's discussion and hearing about some of the solutions that are being explored and implemented in these different contexts. So what we're going to do is we're going to just start with a few minutes from each of our speakers to talk about their country experiences, the different solutions that they've either piloted or explored. And then we'll maybe sort of end with a few questions to wrap things up. So I think we're going to start with Caitlin Hughes, who is the Executive Director of Solar Cookers International, SCI, and their focus is on access to affordable, clean, sustainable energy for cooking. So over to you, Caitlin.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the SDG Pavilion for hosting us for this event, as solar cooking is so aligned with the SDGs. Thank you so much to our collaborators for putting on this event with us, and thank you to my fellow panelists for joining us as well. So yes, Solar Cookers International. So what is the challenge that we are working to address? There are 2.1 billion people who are cooking over open fires, yet this is something that impacts all of us. We're all dealing with the impacts of climate change. And so solar cooking is a really important solution that's working to address this. And it's really important because it's health, environment, economics, and gender, all of these things. So one solar cooker can help a family save from burning 1 ton of wood in 1 year. If you think about that multiplied by the 2.1 billion people cooking over open fires, that has an incredible impact. And unfortunately, it's often women and children who are bearing the brunt of cooking, having to gather fuel, risk attacks in order to gather that fuel, spending time that could be otherwise spent in terms of education or income-generating activities or other things. And breathing in that smoke, which can be so detrimental in terms of increasing risks for respiratory diseases, cancer, even reproductive health, increasing the risk for preterm birth, stillbirths, cataracts, all kinds of things. And so solar cooking is a really important off-grid, accessible solution. So we specialize in solar thermal cooking, and we have a few pictures that are being shown on the screen to showcase some of the different types of solar cookers. There's hundreds of different types, but they all utilize the same basic principle of directing and concentrating sunlight, often on a black pot, that then is heated to cook food, or it can also heat water, making it safe to drink. So solar cookers can range everything from a reflective panel, such as the Cook It, which we actually have one on display at our exhibit booth. It can be made from cardboard and anything reflective, like tin foil or the inside of potato chip bags. And we actually designed it by request of the UNHCR of something that could be made easily and affordably anywhere around the world. There's also box oven solar cookers. That's one of the ones that I cook with very frequently. And it can be used just placed in the sun. We encourage local production as well, which is awesome. I've made lasagna, quiche, enchiladas, brownies, cookies, chili, rice, all kinds of great things in there. So I love cooking with a box cooker. There's also a parabolic solar cooker, which looks like a satellite dish, and it concentrates sunlight to the bottom of the pan, and it gets to those higher temperatures and those faster cooking times. So if you're looking at making something like a stir fry or popcorn, parabolics work really well for that. Part of the expertise that Solar Cookers International offers is helping individuals in communities figure out what solar cooker works best for their needs, their capacity in terms of like their household size, what local materials are available, what their climate is like. So that's one of the many things that we've done in working with our collaborator from the Central African Republic, as well as many others. So how is Solar Cookers International working to address this global challenge? We're working to address it in three main ways: advocacy, capacity building, and research. So advocacy, we are here at COP30 educating government leaders, civil society leaders about the importance and the need to implement solar cooking right away. And we've actually seen the number of countries who highlight solar cooking and are supportive of solar cooking, for example, by saying they want to decrease deforestation. We've seen that number increase, as well as the number of countries who acknowledge that cooking is a priority in addressing climate change. We also work through the High-Level Political Forum, Commission on the Status of Women, many others, and so many government leaders have come up to us and said, this is the solution my people need. Thank you so much for telling us. In terms of building capacity, we work with collaborators in countries such as the Central African Republic, Mali, Kenya, Yemen, India, Nepal, all around the world, anywhere the sun shines. That's where we want to work. We also provide a variety of resources in order to strengthen the solar cooking sector and to share information. For example, we manage the Solar Cooking Wiki, which is 1,800 pages of information available online for free, automatically translated into over 30 languages, with open source instructions on how to make a solar cooker, country by country information, so you can see if anybody in your area is doing anything with solar cooking, where to buy a solar cooker, recipes, all kinds of great things. We also do economic impact summaries, so you can see for each country the potential savings that each country could have by investing in solar cooking. Because people getting sick and dying prematurely is expensive. Climate change is expensive. Relatively speaking, solar cooking can save countries so much money. So a little bit of investment in clean cooking goes a long ways in terms of economics, environment, and health. We also do research. So we're thankful to have Dr. Alan Bigelow here, who's our program and science director. He's led our testing program. So we also have developed the performance evaluation process testing, which is based on ISO standards. So we can measure how powerful different solar cookers are, as well as how efficient they are, so people can make informed decisions about which product will best suit their needs. Back to building capacity, I think this is a great opportunity to turn it over to one of our collaborators.
Great, thanks so much, Caitlin. So exactly, perfect. Thanks for doing my job for me. So next we're going to hear from Polycarp Charlemagne Mandayan, who is from the Ministry of, in charge of Environment and Sustainable Development from the Central African Republic. He's the focal point for the nationally designated entity to the Climate Technology Center and Network, CTCN, within the National Climate Change Coordination Office for CAR. And we're going to have Dr. Bigelow that's also going to be helping translate Polycarp's intervention. So over to you.
Bonjour à tout le monde. Je m'appelle Mandayan Charlemagne Polycarpe. Je suis entité nationale désignée de la République centrafricaine. Et je travaille au ministère de l'Environnement et du Développement durable, à la coordination nationale climat, volet qui s'occupe du changement climatique de la République centrafricaine. Et je remercie beaucoup CTCN, je remercie beaucoup Union européenne, je remercie beaucoup SCI qui ont pris leur temps pour soutenir la République centrafricaine par le projet Cuisson solaire en République centrafricaine. Ce projet a été allé dans l'appui de l'Union européenne, financé par l'Union européenne, parce que le projet cuisson solaire fait partie des projets prioritaires dans le CDN de la République centrafricaine. Et voilà, maintenant, nous sommes engagés dans ce processus pour atteindre le but, accompagnés par les 3 entités que je viens de le citer, CDCN, Union européenne, SCI, qui nous ont accompagnés dans la mise en œuvre. Et l'expertise de ce projet vient par l'Université de Bangui, le lycée technique, qui sont là pour l'expertise de ce projet, accompagnés des 2 sociétés civiles, qui sont là pour la sensibilisation et la vulgarisation. Ce projet a été essayé d'emmener sur les 4 sites périphériques de la ville de Bangui. Et l'effectif ou le nombre de ces kits était 180 pour se distribuer pour les 4 sites. Et voilà, maintenant, ce projet a essayé quand même d'obtenir sa fin. Et les études d'impact et d'adoption et d'impact pour ce projet, c'était que les femmes ont eu le temps de ne pas aller loin dans la forêt pour collecter les bois de chauffe pour venir cuire leur nourriture. Et ça les permet de faire l'économie aussi et la santé aussi. Donc vraiment, ce sont les études qu'on nous a fait sur ce projet. L'analyse a été optée sur les 3, la santé, l'économie et l'environnement. Donc vraiment, ça protège aussi l'environnement par rapport à ce pays. Et vraiment, je tiens à remercier parce que ODD aussi fait partie d'un document qui est allié au document politique et stratégique de la République centrafricaine, CDN, le plan national d'adaptation, le plan de développement et les stratégies de développement à faible émission de carbone. Donc vraiment, nous obtenons pour voir comment ce projet a essayé de voir le lien. Ce projet a... Ce projet a un lien par les documents politiques de la République centrafricaine, en lien aussi avec ODD parce que les objectifs de développement durable fait train aux documents politiques de la République centrafricaine. Et voilà, maintenant, ça nous fait plaisir pour obtenir les partenaires techniques pour soutenir. Et nous aimerions encore de renforcer la capacité des bénéficiaires et d'appuyer la République centrafricaine dans ce sens, dans les projets énergie solaire ou dans les projets cuisson solaire, dans les jours à venir, et vraiment vulgariser ce projet pour les jours à venir. Vraiment, c'est ce que j'ai à vous dire en ce moment.
Merci beaucoup, Polycarp. I'm going to translate and summarize what Polycarp was just saying. Hello, 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 check, check. Okay, can you hear me? All right. So what Polycarp was saying was a lot. So I'm going to paraphrase. He's very thankful to all of the partners that were a part of this initiative. So that is in the CTCN, the Climate Technology Center and Network at the United Nations, and the European Union for the funding, and also working together with Solar Cookers International. Also, he's pointing out in the project to make this happen, it was involving more collaborators at the local level. So there was the University of Bangui. Bangui is the capital of Central African Republic, and the university's physics department and laboratory was able to help bring in expertise for manufacturing solar cookers using locally available materials. Also, there were 2 NGOs that helped, or civil society organizations that helped with the project to get the cookers into 4 communities. And these 4 communities were circling Bangui, so they were not so far away, but each community had its own particular situations and conditions. There was also a gender expert that was a part of this initiative to make sure that gender inclusivity was a part of all aspects of the initiative from A to Z. And this is a tremendous advantage to have that focus in this work. Polycarp was also explaining how the SDGs are linked to all these aspects of the work, and how it connected with the national plan and the country's nationally determined contributions. And this was a very important key that allowed this initiative to happen in the first place. So one of the things that we do at Solar Cookers International every year is we review the NDCs and look for language that is supportive of solar cooking. And when you see that language in there, it allows the opportunities to progress. So that's a very important thing that we'd like to share with other countries, is if you're interested in solar cooking, put it in your NDC. Foremost, Polycarp was coming back to the users, the women who are in the communities and the impacts on the women. So he was mentioning three things. One is health. So the women are typically tasked with the cooking process, which often involves time to go and collect wood and bring it home. It also involves money to pay for the firewood and charcoal. But again, you're bringing that home and you're using those polluting fuels, you're getting smoke in your face. This is leading to all kinds of health impacts. So through solar cooking, this project over the 18 months is already showing through data collection a reduction in health aspects. So people's health is improving, and they're spending less on firewood, so it's better for their economics. And for the environmental aspects also, there's been improvements. Finally, Polycarp was saying they need to do more. We can't just stop at a pilot project, but this has to spread across the country. So additional funding is necessary to keep this scaling along the roadmap that was produced during the initiative that we have together. OK, Polycarp, c'était beaucoup, mais j'ai traduit, j'ai fait la sommaire. I'm not sure how we are on time. Maybe
Sure.
I know we'll have a chance to have another cycle, but I think he was able to cover everything that we wanted to discuss the project. But happy to hear more questions. OK, merci.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that, Polycarp. So we're going to move from Central African Republic to India.
Yeah.
And so we've got Shruti Sharma here, who is the lead of IISD's India program and leads our work also on affordable energy. So she's going to share a few slides to capture some of the work that's been happening in India. Over to you, Shruti.
Thank you. So maybe I want to talk a little bit about electricity-based cooking in India. And I want to start with some broad sort of setting the context of why it's making sense to switch to renewable-based cooking in India. And sort of the number one reason is that the way the Indian households are cooking right now, their fuel mix, is largely focused on LPG-based cooking. So about 63% of Indian households do use clean cooking fuels, and largely is LPG. And the remaining are using solid fire, so biomass-based cooking, and largely most of them are based in rural areas. So I think I'll start focusing a little bit more on what works for urban households. And you'll notice less than 1% of Indian households are using electricity-based cooking, and pretty much the whole premise of the argument here is LPG, which is roadblocking electricity-based cooking transitions. So when we unpack a little bit more about what LPG is doing, the government is primarily subsidizing these large 14 kgs red canisters that are delivered to the households. And these are subsidized when households receive it. And the subsidy is accumulated so much over the years. So the last data that we have for 2023, which is going to be updated soon in December, shows about the government is subsidizing and paying about 5 billion annually for LPG subsidies. And largely it's gone through mostly supporting households and decreasing the price of the red LPG canister. And there's also levers of tax compensation and tax cesses and exemptions on custom duty, because LPG is imported, a lot of it. So altogether, the whole thing then combined adds up to a huge fiscal burden, which is growing over the years. So the graph on the right is primarily showing that. One of the big reasons to do and quantify what LPG subsidy savings looks like is because it helps in conversations with policymakers to help sort of start the momentum on why a transition is important. So what we tried to do was we wanted to get a solid big figure around what does it mean in terms of government savings if you transition towards electricity-based cooking. And we wanted to envision 3 scenarios where there is a low scenario that 20% of households, urban households primarily, start switching towards electricity cooking by 2050. and then a medium scenario of 40% households transition, and then a really ambitious one around like 60% of urban households are using electricity-based cooking by 2050. And we did a gradual reform for these households. It's not like they switch overnight and start using LPG absolutely. We said that, okay, let's see, maybe every 2 to 3 years, they give up 2 cylinders each. So it's really slow and conservative estimates, so it can be really taken in like absolutely easily. And we've got estimates of how much LPG cylinders a typical household uses per month. So we can estimate how much saving the government will have in terms of LPG subsidy, but also in terms of like the import bill coming down, because the government is no longer going to sort of import LPG. So altogether, when we look at it, on the left is the LPG subsidy expenditure that the government has. So you've got your business as usual scenario, which is on the top. So LPG subsidy expenditure is as it is, increasing. But the really high scenario, which is on the bottom, is the huge savings that are coming in. That combined with the import substitution that happens because the government no longer needs to import LPG is exactly then what the savings that come on the right side. So you've got really high savings in the blue line up there going up. And by 2050, we estimate that can go up to 1.8 trillion. So this is a significant like number that the government really sort of needs to focus on. And that's like the policy push that we need. The second thing is cost economics at home, right? Like the market is going to take care of itself. So when we start comparing household spending on LPG versus piped natural gas, that's like some urban households now have access to it, versus electricity-based cooking, you can see that between the two figures, between LPG and PNG, it looks like roughly the same that households are spending. But that's also because LPG is heavily subsidized and piped natural gas, which is PNG, is not subsidized. So that's why it looks fairly similar. But the big picture here is that electricity is still far cheaper, even compared to subsidized LPG. So LPG prices right now, after subsidy, are comparing, and they are still more expensive than electricity-based cooking. And I think this awareness is not there with households. So maybe one of the things that I want to raise around is just capacity building and building like communication campaigns around letting households know that there is a cheaper alternative to subsidized LPG. I think the additional thing that we found was that a lot of households also receive subsidized electricity, and electricity subsidies are a huge problem. But in spite of that, the cost of supply from coal-based electricity is around 6 rupees. And even that, and even if prices go up for electricity, which they won't, because the grid is being decarbonized, so cheaper renewable-based electricity is powering the grid, even that can compete with subsidized electricity. With subsidized LPG. The last thing, just like the rationale to again like talk about LPG subsidies regressive, is that they are not reaching the poor. So Anne spoke about this in her opening remarks. This is just evidence that we did through survey-based work, where we found that most of the LPG subsidies are being delivered to, about half of them are reaching the richest, the top 20, 40, the top 2 quintiles, which is quintile 4 and 5. So they're the 40% of the richest households in the country, and they're getting more than 50% of the benefits, but the graph should have been reversed. It should have been the poorest who would be receiving it. So there's a lot of evidence that they're not really benefiting low-income households. So just in terms of way forward, there's a tilt which is required in like shifting LPG subsidies away. And unless that reform sort of sets the path forward for public financial flows to be freed up from LPG, it won't make the right incentives for grid modernization and for electricity supply to be stabilized for households to easily adopt. The other thing is that consumers still are very biased about cooking on open flames, but all of those solutions can be delivered from electricity-based cooking. So those cultural preferences need a little bit of time and a natural sort of norm to sit in, that electricity can also deliver all the same cooking preferences and behaviors. I think there is more equity in households shifting towards electricity-based cooking, because electricity subsidies can be sort of better targeted, because there's metered consumption, you can better identify who your low-income households are. And the last bit is just there is a lot more research and development which is needed to make the electricity stoves and the equipment more subsidized, which again is needed like as the capital investment for low-income households. So maybe with that, I'll stop.
Great, thanks so much, Shruti. And so we're going to continue on our journey from India to Indonesia. And so we're going to hear now from Maxensius Trisambodo, who is a senior researcher at the National Research and Innovation Agency, BRIN. His research interests are on economic development, energy, environment, and natural resources. So over to you, Max.
Okay, thank you, Anna. I think there are two main components that I'm going to share with all of you. The first one is related to the G20 country context. And then in the second part, I would like to see in the Indonesian context. So I think this figure is very, very important. We can see that from these figures, it is quite clear that in many G20 countries, they are trying to push a lot on gas, this including LPG as a main source of cookings. Or you can see how the importance of Indonesia in increasing the number of gas to do substitution from kerosene before, since the last 50 years. And we also can see how in here is China doing transition for electric source. And then we also can see how the India and China. So basically we can see that since the last 15 years, there is very rapid adoption of new technology and also source of cooking. However, we see that most of the transitions go to the fossil fuels. And from these figures, we also can notice that actually all the countries have very strong capability. Why? Because within 15 years, actually they can move very fast to do transitions. Maybe the challenge for us is how to give something, how to give good prescription for the country to move in a better way to green energy sources. And this figure indicate that among the G20 countries, they still give a lot of subsidy. And from the previous figure, we can see that most of subsidy goes for fossil fuels. And we can see from the case of Indonesia, for example, we spend about 50% of our GDP go for subsidy. India, 10%, China, 12%. And most go for implicit and explicit subsidy. That means there is a situation of undercharging of the fossil fuels, or maybe we undercharging the cost of environment, tax, and other to the consumer sides. So this is not kind of sustainable strategy, because as we see before, with this kind of situation, actually still many populations is not have connected with the clean energy for cooking. You see 2.1 billion. And even 50%, almost 50% of them are in Asia countries. So I think we need to change the games. We need to redefine again how we can make the subsidy work for the poor. And another study that we also doing, around 50 to 70% of subsidies go for kind of direct supports for the price, but not so many go for regulation improvement, good governance, infrastructure, and so on. So I think we also need to think how to reallocate the subsidy, go for other more long-term benefit for the community. So this is the case study of Indonesia. Indonesia really depends on LPG. Around 80% of the households use LPG for cooking. So if you see the situation, this is not good, because in terms of risk, in terms of energy diversification, we put in the bad way. We put a lot of risk to LPG, especially among 70% of LPG are imported. So if something happen in supply disruptions, price increase, they will impact a lot on our national budget also, right? You can see that most of energy subsidy also go for LPGs. So this is not kind of good way that we have now. So another issue with the cooking picture. This picture is very important because it shows that this is decile of household from the poor to the rich, 10 mean the rich. So the rich also consume a lot of LPG 3 kilograms. That is get a lot of subsidy from governments. If you see here, for the low decile, for the poorest, they still use firewood for cooking. So this is also showing that imbalance situations among the households. So you can see for non-subsidy LPG, such as 5 kilograms or 12 kilograms, even the poor also buy it. So they pay higher compared with the rich. So the challenge now is how we can change these regimes. And we can see also another sources like electricity, sectors, consumption is still very low. It's still very low. So the challenge now is not only how we can reallocate for better strategizing, but also how to make a balanced diversifications in this situation to reduce the risk of transitions. So what we can conclude from looking on the global context and also Indonesian context is we need to more commit and put in the clear calendars how we can do the transition to clean energy for cooking. What kind of milestone among the G20 countries need to expose to others, and then how we can also reduce the LPG subsidy that now most of the country go to that corners. How we can change the directions. And then the two is we need to publish clean cooking roadmaps among the countries. I think the roadmap is important for us to learn each other among the countries, and then how we can collaborate between developed and developing countries and among the G20 members. I think that is the agenda. This is not easy, but I believe with the strong commitments, with good leaderships and good intention, maybe we can work together to change the games. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Max. And so we've had both sort of the very practical experiences shared with us and some more sort of policy research oriented solutions that have come from India and Indonesia. Caitlin, I want to go back to you, kind of tying back, maybe bring some policy into what you have to share. What have you seen released on solar cooking related in the various NDCs? How is it being picked up? We heard from Polycarp that it was important to sort of see that link. So have you sort of looked at NDCs more broadly and sort of picked up on how solar cooking is being reflected in them?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. So one of the things that Solar Cookers International does is every year we analyze the NDCs to see which ones mention clean cooking, solar cooking, or things that are supportive of solar cooking, for example, wanting to decrease deforestation. We have that report on our website, solarcookers.org. We welcome you to check it out. We also have printouts at in our binders at our exhibit booth. But I want to really highlight the Central African Republic because they also had specific targets. So for example, 10% of the population with access to solar cooking by 2030. And from what I've heard from Polycarp, they are so excited about solar cooking that when they do the next version of their NDC, they actually want to increase that target. Now, of course, that requires funding, but having it specifically in the policies opens doors. So, for example, that made it easier for us to access United Nations Climate Technology Center and Network funding, which allowed us to do this work. Also, with that work, though, we've been able to look at how to scale this up. And so thank you to the CTCN for funding a feasibility study so that we can explore additional funding mechanisms. For example, carbon finance, because like I said, we're seeing one solar cooker can save 1 ton of wood. Multiply that by, you're getting to levels of the population where that can create a significant investment opportunity. We're also looking at opportunities to pair with microfinance groups. And so that's an additional way because with solar cooking, people can save half of their expenses from fuel with a solar cooker. And so then that savings can go to repaying the cost of the cooker. There can also be job creation opportunities as well. So producing solar cookers locally, selling solar cookers, also jobs from solar cooking. So value add from solar drying, for example, baking a cake, which would be harder to do over an open fire, all kinds of things like that. So we also want to highlight Sao Tome and Lesotho. They are 2 additional countries that have highlighted solar cooking in their NDC, so shout out to them. And we encourage other countries to follow suit from the Central African Republic.
Thanks for that. Now, Polycarp, you had mentioned in what you had shared in describing what was happening in Central African Republic, some of the various impacts that solar cooking has had in the pilot communities related to health and the environment and gender and energy costs. Would you be able to elaborate on those a bit more? Maybe some of the stories that are coming out from this pilot experience?
Ok, Polycarp, c'est une question pour vous. Elle a remarqué que vous avez parlé des bénéfices pour les femmes dans les communautés au niveau de santé économie et aussi de l'environnement. S'il vous plaît, est-ce que vous pouvez élaborer sur ces bénéfices, peut-être avec des histoires des femmes, peut-être ils avaient rencontré quelques petites histoires individuelles. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Après la distribution de cuisson solaire, on avait fait une analyse d'impact. Vous savez que les femmes de chez nous, ils aillent dans la forêt pour aller chercher des bois de chauffe pour aller venir préparer leur nourriture. Et il y a la distance qui est là aussi. Parfois, les femmes peuvent aller dans les champs pour aller chercher du fagot. Il peut mordu par un serpent. Et c'est un problème aussi. Et la durée d'aller dans la forêt pour aller chercher du bois de chauffe pour venir préparer de la nourriture, ça prend du temps aussi parce que c'est un trajet pénible. Parce que comme la déforestation est là, la forêt est poussée loin. Et voilà, maintenant, les femmes aillent loin pour aller chercher du fagot. Et ça joue sur leur santé. En utilisant les femmes utilisent les bois de chauffe pour préparer leur nourriture. Et il y aura des fumées qui sont là, ça provoque des maladies de respiration. Et côté bénéfique économique, parce qu'auparavant, ils dépensent leur argent parfois. Un ménage peut dépenser 500 francs par jour ou 1000 francs par jour pour payer le fagot pour préparer la nourriture. Mais en arrivant du cuisson solaire, le coût est diminué. Le coût est diminué, voilà, maintenant ça les prend en bénéfice pour qu'ils puissent avoir de l'argent pour économiser quelque part. Et l'environnement, parce qu'il n'y avait pas de pression dans la forêt. Et voilà, maintenant, la forêt va garder sa nature pour qu'il n'y ait pas de pression dans la forêt, pour que les femmes aillent pour aller chercher du fagot et revenir préparer leur nourriture. Vraiment, ce sont les impacts positifs qui sont après la distribution de la four solaire.
Merci. Polycarp, thanks you for asking the question. And as he was elaborating on the facets of the positive impacts on the women who were involved in this initiative, he was talking about the hardship on women who go and scavenge for firewood and the time that it takes to go into the forest regularly to seek firewood is actually increasing because of the forest degradation. As the forest degrades, the women have to go farther into to find firewood. So that means that the time that they spend doing this is also increasing, and the risks that they are experiencing increase. So with solar cooking, it can help reduce that effort and that hardship. On the financial savings aspect, certainly from the adoption and impact survey that was conducted, we have data now that show that the amount of expenditure on fuel is reduced, and that amount of money can be used for other things. So the adoption impact survey is a great tool for gaining these types of data. And finally, on the environmental side, because of this constant seeking of wood that it happens, because people do need to cook their food, through solar cooking, it's a reduction of the need to go and seek firewood. So it's right now an aspiration of a goal, because it's very early in the initiative where it's just 18 months in right now. But the expectation is that the forests will recover and that there will be more environmental benefits felt there that will not only be felt at the forest level, but for the people and those who are around the forest. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that. Shruti, quickly, you had mentioned in your presentation, you spoke about the urban households.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if you might have a few thoughts to share on what the situation is for the rural households and with subsidies for cooking.
Yeah, sure. So you're right. We spoke a lot about urban households, and that's because by like 2050, about like 70% of the population is going to be aggregated in urban households. So it seems like a fairly like easy target to pick on. For rural households, a more decentralized approach is easier to consider, and there are many sort of options in the menu that we can offer to them. But for rural households where affordability is a bigger concern and delivery is still a concern, a more gentler approach to reform is sort of needed. So we still see them using LPG, but that LPG subsidy is being freed up from urban households is like the first approach. And the second is that the next sort of non-fossil or renewable options for them includes like biogas, and also sort of solar cookers as well. So for biogas, we've done a lot of research on to show that, and it can be cost competitive compared to LPG-based cooking, but it again requires a little bit of a capital investment for households to be supported. So there is an additional subsidy burden that requires from like subnational governments as well, which can be harder up fiscally. So it's important to sort of like slow the transition and move the urban sort of aggregate mass a little bit. But that sort of approach, again, like more decentralized, where like rural households can control their asset, they can continue to fuel stack, they can use LPG mixed with biogas, with whatever option, again, is like comfortable for them and affordable, but slowly like move them towards non-fossil or like sort of renewable options. I would say probably that's where we are right now with rural households. Yeah.
So maybe a slower, gentler transition is what I'm
exactly.
hearing. Okay,
Yes.
interesting. Max, question for you. So maybe you could say a few words about some of the pilots that have been taking place in Indonesia that have gone on with electricity cooking.
Yeah.
Could you share about that experience from Indonesia?
Yeah, I think the pilot project is very interesting because this is a project that actually come from the private sector, from the state-owned company, government. They try to conduct a pilot project in Bali and Central Java on how the community changing from LPG to induction stove. There is a lot of good issue coming because sometimes we think that the poor, they are not familiar with the technology, they are maybe feeling afraid with that ones. There's a possibility of risk for the thing that coming from the top, right? And then when we come to the grounds and then meeting a lot of household, women, men, and so on, actually they are really enjoys with the new induction stove because as we see, this is quite clean, safety, and then they also feel cheaper, even more convenience, and especially for the vulnerable groups, they don't have to worry to carry 3 kilogram LPG every day, so they just plug and in. So I think the context is different between the top and the grassroots. So now the challenge is how to make decision maker to be more listen to the people, what they want, and then how they can accommodate with the resource they have to do transition from the LPG. That is very risky in terms of national budget, in terms of energy security. Why not trying for something that we are already in the grounds that really benefit to the peoples? I think we need to change that mindset. And then with this research, I think we try to advocate government to look differently in make a judgment about clean cookings. I think that maybe the thing that's very interesting from our story, from the grounds. I think that's enough. Thanks. Yeah.
Great, thanks. So a common theme I'm hearing across the board is just, I mean, the transformative potential of clean cooking, solar cooking is huge, but it's also very contextualized. And it really is sort of linked to, we need to have a real understanding of the local needs, preferences. And in the areas that I work, which tends to be more on the climate change adaptation side, the importance of behavioral change and insights and all that is just so fundamental, and I'm hearing it come out also quite strongly in the experiences that you're sharing. So look, I know that people are probably melting. I don't know if there's any sort of questions that people might have for any of our speakers. Yeah?
Thank you a lot. My name is Janvier Kabananier. I'm from Rwanda. I work with the Rwanda Energy Group, which is the national power utility. I will share a short experience with the clean cooking initiative that we have in country. I'm leading the R&D department, research and development. We have recently started a study where we gave induction cooker and a pressure cooker to different people in Kigali, 400 households. Then we want to follow them for 6 months to see what will be the change in their power consumption. Then from that, we want to develop a policy recommendation to call for the government to introduce what we call e-cooking tariff, because we believe with that e-cooking tariff, which is subsidized, will promote the e-cooking in urban setting. Now, in rural setting, we have used the solar cooking system, but we don't really go for the direct radiation for solar for cooking. We transform the solar into electricity through inverter, battery, then we provide induction cooker and pressure cooker. So we are addressing two things at once. We are giving access to electricity, and we are giving a technology for cooking. So my first question goes to Mr. Polycarp. I want to understand the convenience of using the direct radiation, because people, they have to cook outside, not indoors. What happens once there is rain, when it is a cloudy day? So is it really convenient to use that technology from your experience? My second question goes to Kathleen. So we did that pilot project with a solar cooking system, and the results are very promising, and we want to scale up. So on the financial side of things, how do you support other countries to scale up those kind of initiatives? Thank you.
Thanks very much. Maybe the first question to Polycarp.
OK. Polycarp, c'était une question pour vous. Et le monsieur, il vient de Rwanda, Kigali, et il travaille sur un projet qui utilise les panneaux solaires photovoltaïques pour emmener de l'électricité dans les ménages. Et avec ça, il peut utiliser l'électricité pour faire la cuisine ou bien pour d'autres choses. Mais il demande dans votre projet, dans notre projet, est-ce que c'est convenable pour les femmes en utilisant les cuisseurs solaires thermiques pour faire la cuisine? Et il demande ça avec le contexte quand il pleut ou bien quand il est nuageux. Comment elles vont faire la cuisine?
Merci beaucoup. Vraiment, j'ai pris au cœur la question de mon frère de Rwanda. Et vraiment, comme on avait obtenu ce projet, parce que ce projet fait partie des projets prioritaires dans le CDN de la République centrafricaine. Et voilà, du coup, comme il y a des partenaires qui sont là pour financer ce projet, automatiquement, on a essayé de récupérer le projet pour la RCA. Voilà, en parlant un peu sur les difficultés, voilà, ça fait partie des difficultés. Quand la pluie tombe, vraiment, c'est un problème, on ne peut pas cuire avec. Donc, ça fait partie des difficultés de ce projet. Donc, c'est à base du soleil qu'on peut cuire la nourriture du moment à l'autre. Mais au fait, s'il y a la pluie, c'est un problème. Donc, vraiment, je peux te dire sur ça.
Okay, I'll just translate. He takes your question to heart and appreciates your question. And he says that this is something that is a reality for these communities. He's also sharing that this is a priority for his country, solar cooking. And so we have to respond to the priority and to the donors. And so this is where we have come this far. But he's recognizing that it's still a challenge, that there are the cooking times when there is not sun access, and that does need to be addressed. If I can just interject something, the solar thermal cooker is an integrative solution, and it's intended to be added to what is already there. Also, we have complementary technologies that are promoted along with the solar cooker, such as a heat retention basket. And if you use the heat retention basket in addition to a solar thermal cooker, you can start the meal when there is sunlight, but then transition your cooking pot to a heat retention system, and it will keep cooking well into the evening, and sometimes even in the morning you can have a hot meal. So these are some of the creative solutions that need to be explored. And from his perspective, this is something that we will keep working on, and very excited to continue. But thank you for your question very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very thoughtful questions, and as well directed to Polycarp. I'll also add, you said that solar cooking has to be done outside, which is true. As I mentioned before, I'm a solar cook. One of the reasons I love solar cooking is you can set it and forget it. So I'll put my food with my solar cooker outside. I'll go back inside, keep working away, doing what I need to do. And it depends on the solar cooker type, the parabolic you need to be with it, the box oven, which I cook with the most frequently, the reflective panel. You can just put it out there, go back inside, go into the shade, go do whatever else you need to do. I live in Sacramento, California, where it also gets very hot. So the last thing that I want to do is add more heat inside where I am, keep it outside. And we think there is a lot of opportunity for complementary technologies with electricity as well. So for example, solar thermal cooking can be the most efficient for cooking and for heating water, and electricity can be the most efficient, for example, for charging your cell phone. So there's room for all of those solutions. I think looking at the price as well, there are models of solar cookers that can be really affordable, so seeing what that comparison looks like. It's a really accessible technology too, so it can be made, like I said, affordably anywhere around the world. So I think be very curious to continue the conversation and help figure out what's the best fit. In Mali, we offered the variety of technologies, and we can see that that was really well received within the community. So people who wanted a solar thermal example, or multiple solar thermal cookers, or solar PV, there's that choice. And so working with communities and individuals to see what the best fit is. What you mentioned before, a couple of the things that we do is a quick needs assessment. So working with communities and households to see, okay, are they interested in learning a new technology? Do they have access to sun? What's the household capacity number of people that they're cooking for? Those types of things, so it's a good fit. We also have an adoption and impact survey where we do a baseline and post-distribution data. Your question about scaling up, how do we work with countries? So part of the reason we're here is to get to know people from countries, and then looking for opportunities that could be pursued. So for example, Jeff, that's something that we're looking at. So working with countries to see, okay, how can we share our expertise in terms of solar cooking? Because a lot of times some of these funding opportunities need to have interest expressed by the country itself. For example, why the Central African Republic was so successful, because there was that stated interest, and then able to pursue some of those additional opportunities and bring in that. We're a relatively small nonprofit, so we want to work with countries towards finding those additional opportunities to help scale.
Thanks very much, and thanks for those questions. So I think we'll start wrapping up here, and so I just really want to say that this has been a fantastic conversation to really hear about the practical solutions and experiences from a variety of contexts. It's clear that different options and approaches are being explored, and we're really digging into alternatives for clean cooking apart from LPG. And so I think that we know that clean cooking has been a call to action for political leadership for decades, and we've been wanting more evidence, and so it's clear that there's actually a really big body of evidence and just growing. And so that excuse in some ways for evidence before taking some of the bigger and transformative decisions in fora like this is not really legitimate. We know what needs to be done. And what needs to be done is we need to now turn that into roadmaps and practical commitments to get that next step. So I just really want to thank our speakers for being here with us today and for sharing these experiences. And thank you for your question and for sitting all together in this heat. And wish you a good rest of your COP. So thank you.
Gentlemen here.